Former senator and former Democratic candidate Lincoln Chafee actually wrote a great article in the New York Times on the Iraq War, and he makes a really interesting case against what Hillary's vote was. Now, she apologized for her vote, but she often explains it by saying, well, look, everybody voted for it, or almost everybody voted for it, and it was to give the president the option of war, not actually to go to war, and there was no third choice. I mean, what were we going to do? There was no middle ground. There was no middle ground. It was either for or against. Everybody was for. Okay, it happened. Well, it turns out that that's actually not true. So there was kind of a middle ground on this, so Chafee explains. As someone who was in the Senate at the time, I have been struck by the contours of the debate. The situation facing the candidates who cast war votes has, to my surprise, often been presented as a binary one. They could either vote for the war or not. There was no middle ground. On the contrary, there was indeed a third way. A mere 10 hours before the roll was called on the administration-backed Iraq War resolution, the Senate had an opportunity to prevent the current catastrophe in Iraq and to salvage the United States' international standing. Carl Levin, Democrat of Michigan, offered a substitute to the war resolution, the Multilateral Use of Force Authorization Act of 2002. Senator Levin's amendment called for the United Nations approval before force could be authorized. It was unambiguous and compatible with international law. Okay, so understand what this amendment was, and this is actually a brilliant idea from Carl Levin here. What he said is, it's not just a straight up or down vote. So we're not saying, yes, go to war, give Bush the power to go to war, which he took. It's not that, or no war. We're going to stop. No, nothing. Not even going to consider it. The middle ground was, okay, we're not saying yes or no, but we are saying if we go to the UN says yes, then we can go to war. But of course, the United States being the United States, they're like, international law. Oh, that's a good one. International law, schminternational schlaw. I don't care about that at all. Just go to war and fuck the UN. Well, according to international law, any country that goes to war has to get approval through the UN. So I love how the proposal from Carl Levin, which is a good proposal, is just saying, hey, let's follow international law. And if we follow international law and then the answer is still you can go to war, well, then we'll go to war. But if we follow international law and the United Nations says you can't go to war, well, then we won't go to war. So it was an extra layer of oversight and accountability. Now, if the senators voted for the middle ground, so not even, hey, voted against the war, if they just voted for the middle ground here, we wouldn't have had the war in Iraq. We wouldn't have had the war in Iraq. There would be minimum 200,000 people that are still alive, mostly civilians. We would have saved trillions of dollars, and we would have prevented this absolute catastrophe and one of the biggest foreign policy disasters in the modern era. But since people don't care about international law, since people didn't want to be nuanced on it, they didn't want to be nuanced, we know what happened. Hillary Clinton was one of those people who was proudly not nuanced, who not only voted for the war and in the process snubbed international law when presented with the opportunity to embrace international law and take a middle ground on the vote. So you need to stop and think about this. You have one candidate who just voted against the war, period. Didn't even go for the middle ground, was just right and said, no, I don't see the evidence. I'm not going to fucking vote for the war. The default position is no war unless you prove to me we need a war. You didn't prove it to me. I don't believe you. I don't believe you, neocons. So one voted against it. The other one had the opportunity, the option of a middle ground or for it. She said, I'm voting for it. Why? Because this is Hillary Clinton. Where are the political wins, baby? Give me some of them political wins. Even if it means doing an illegal war and violating constitutional rights, I will look for the political wins of the time and do what I think you want me to do because principles schmincibles, I don't care about them. I just don't care. So she ended up voting for an illegal war. And of course, when it comes to constitutional rights, we did cover the story the other week. She was giving speeches about how we need to ban flag burning, punish it with a year in jail and a $100,000 fine. Do you have no idea how the fucking First Amendment works? Even Antonin Scalia, a far right-wing prick, was like, this is obviously protected by the First Amendment. This is political speech. This is free expression. Like, who could be against this? Hillary's like, I'm against it because I think the polls show that the American people are don't really like flag burning, so I don't care about rights anymore. Illegal war? Yeah, let's go for an illegal war because that's the mood of the country at the moment. So I'm for illegal wars and killing civilians and taking away your rights in the Patriot Act, for example, if it means you'll like me in this brief second. There you go. That's her character. You have the choice. Bernie Sanders, who's been principled and consistent and right, or her.